it's been such a slow, gradual, you think about the cliche, the metaphor about the frog in the boiling water.
Yeah.
Right. It's just been getting warmer by just 1 degree a year. And so it's pretty easy to adapt to it and just be like, oh, it's not that bad. This is just one little thing. Oh, that's just one little thing. It's not a big deal. Oh, that's just one other little thing. It's no biggie. Until you wake up one day and there's a pregnant man emoji on your phone. And you're like, how on earth did we get here? Right? How did we get, and there's like a pregnant man on the cover of Time magazine, and your kids
Yeah.
in the supermarket line, like, look, Dad, that's a pregnant man. You're like, no, honey, that's a pregnant woman pretending to be a man.
Battle Line podcast, very special episode, talking about Men's Alliance with David Goose Mills, founder and director of Men's Alliance. Man, you know what I was going to tell you? I'm very psyched for this weekend because if you listened 2 episodes ago, Blue Angels will be on the IMAX screen. I don't know about you. I will absolutely be going. I'm psyched for it. And then a week later, I'm seeing the actual Blue Angels at Jones Beach. It's going to be
That's
sick.
cool. That's cool. We'll see. I know I've got to go. I'm speaking at a event in State College, Pennsylvania, beginning of next week. So it just depends on travel and getting back. And then we've got some bottle signings coming up because the vodka's getting distributed in Louisiana.
Yeah.
So
we don't. People have said we don't promote it enough. So yeah, Tonto.
Well,
vodka.
there's nothing right now until I know we're in a state. And I know that the stores have it. I'm not going to tell you that it's there because then I'm full of shit. And I go,
but you still order it online, right?
We're getting it. Not there. We're almost got that.
In the past, you were
in the past, we have. When we changed distilleries from Dalton to Black Hat Distiller, it really literally is. And for all you in the liquor business, you guys are like the mafia, dude. It's just like the freaking. So we have to read, and the government, just like the mafia, got to redo paperwork. It's all this other crap we got to do. It's like you're starting all over when you had to change distilleries. So yeah, we will. And believe me, I'll be doing some promotions. We'll mention it on the podcast. And also, I actually, because of the vodka, I have a YouTube channel for the vodka, which is just specifically for, and that's at the request of the distillery, not because of my ugly ass face. But then we'll have the information out. But the earliest bottle signing that's coming up is in Louisiana, and it'll be in Covington, Metairie, and then out at Fort Polk. And I don't care what you guys want to call it, it's still Fort Polk to me. And then that's out by Alexandria, and that's on from June 10th through the 13th is when I'll be there. And I'll do a promotion on it of which stores I'm going to be at. We'll put it on the website as well. So you guys will get all that. But right now, guys, yeah, I'd love to put out that we're everywhere and we can buy it online, but not yet. And I won't put anything out until I'm certain that we have the shipping capabilities, because I don't want to be a liar to y'all. That's just.
And I just looked up, so that I think this should be the right YouTube. It just launched at Tonto Vodka on YouTube.
Yeah,
I see a video about the logo meaning, so
that's all. That's all we've got up there yet, because I got no more information right now to tell you, or I'd be lying to you, and I don't want to jump the gun.
Cool. All right. Well, subscribe to at Tonto Vodka on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, leave us a comment, subscribe if you're listening on the audio platforms. But before we get into this interview about Men's Alliance, if you are not getting a good night's sleep, I have to say I genuinely don't know why. Ned's magnesium supplement, Mellow Magnesium, is the best for sleep, bar none. With over 700 5-star customer reviews, Ned's Mellow Magnesium is an instant hit. Nourish your entire body with Ned's proprietary super blend with 3 forms of chelated magnesium, GABA, L-theanine, and over 70 trace minerals. It propels memory, mood, brain function, stress response, nerve and muscle health, and of course, sleep. And 75% of Americans are deficient in magnesium. We actually talk a little bit about health on this episode, and if you're not supplementing with the right stuff, yeah, it's something that you need. So check out Ned's Mellow Magnesium. Also check out their CBD, their Brain Blend, all great supplements. Go to helloned.com/battleline. And as a first-time customer, you'll get a great discount through us. That's HELLONED.com/battleline. Thank you, Ned. And with that, let's get right over to our interview.
Kansas City to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Chris Tonto Peranto.
Switch is on, motherfucker, I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
You know, Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battle Line Podcast.
The Switch is on, Battle Line Podcast. David Goose Mills, founder and director of Men's Alliance. And actually, before we even get into your background or anything, I actually have to really say thank you so much for coming on kind of last minute, to pull the curtain back a little bit. We had what I thought was like a pretty cool exclusive, a Ukrainian operator, captain, who wanted to come on the podcast, who reached out. So, regardless of people's feelings of what's going on over there, it was like, I want to hear from a guy on the ground. And
now, full disclosure, though, and we would have said this, we could not verify if he's. We think he is, but it's hard to verify. It was hard to verify if he's legit or not. So he will come on, and if you're hearing this, brother, come on, so we can validate your legitness. Is that a word? Legitness? It's my word.
Absolutely.
We can validate your legit, because we do want to hear about what's going on there. I do.
Yeah,
whether you like it or not, I still want to hear from somebody who's actually. The one guys on the ground, I want to hear from them. I don't want to hear from politicians or media people. I want to hear from the guys fighting. That's who I want to hear from.
I do feel like he's the real deal based on what he sent me, but I agree, just putting that out there. And yeah, I mean, he said he's under basically heavy fire right now. Totally understandable. I think the last thing you need to do is a podcast during that. But yeah, David stepped up, and actually, the cool thing about you coming on, and I want to get into your background, but I feel like there's a lot of groups right now with parallel thinking, and I think it's because there's like a need for men to come together to form communities because we are more isolated than ever. And I do feel like in a lot of ways, you can't say it in this politically correct society, but it's like men are becoming second-class citizens. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, man, I completely agree with you. There is something going on, and we've seen the problem for many years, and now we're starting to see groups like Men's Alliance and some other parallel groups that are starting to address this problem. And we get into it later, but we actually started Men's Alliance in January 2017. So that was back when the world was still fairly sane.
Yeah.
And so we kind of got a head start because we started this, had it going with a couple of years, got some traction, and then the world lost its mind, and we were like, thank God we had this thing going, right? So that's when it's been blowing up ever since then. But you're absolutely right. And it's a huge problem. I think it's a much bigger problem than people realize. Both macro and micro, with men in general, as well as just a man, a dude, you and me. When people see a man, they see a guy who is strong and is usually, I'm generalizing here, usually pretty strong and generally not too much of excessive displays of emotion. So the way that double-edged sword cuts both ways is that people will then think he's good. He has no problems. He's got it all together. He doesn't need any help.
Yeah, you're privileged.
Yeah, and then you see that from a guy, but then you see that for all guys. You see that for all men, right? And so just kind of like as a group, people have been thinking for decades, oh, the men are fine. The men are okay. They're strong. They've got this. And then what we've started to see statistically is we're not fine. We are not okay. We are leading the demographics in suicide and addiction, incarceration, and depression. So we need help, right? And the Men's Alliance, tool that we're offering for that help is getting men out of isolation. Like you said, we got to get men into tribes, get them around a fire, and connect them with that band of brothers. And that's where good things start to happen.
What do you think? What do you think happened, or how do you think that started? As far as the separation, because even I did that post a lot. Toxic masculinity. I am. If that's what I'm a toxic male. I am freaking. I'll say sir and yes, ma'am. I still believe in chivalry. I mean, I think that
And
was
that's not
given a
being a
bad,
toxic
but that's
male,
what I'm
it's the
saying.
opposite.
That
Right.
was, and that's what I was getting at. The attack, there was attack, and there still is attack on masculinity from those that I would say are not masculine, that don't have those traits, and that are applying the worst part of being a man to toxic masculinity, where now they're saying, men are, they're narcissistic, their egos, those alpha males, all they do want is just the bully. I just call them the bully syndrome, which is completely opposite. It's wrong. And
Right.
do you think, and what I was getting at here is also with the groups and stuff, even back when I was growing up, living out in rural America, which I grew up mainly in rural America, we had groups. The farmers had the co-ops.
Yep.
They'd come in the morning, and we have a little diner here, even still in Kansas, where in the mornings, the old farmers still go in there and eat breakfast in the morning. You had your groups. So we've had that kind of group male mentality for years and years. Did it start to get destroyed with the attack on masculinity by those people that weren't masculine, when the world did start to turn on its ear and everything went nuts, and people started to say, well, wait, that's not masculine. That's being a bully. That's being that damn white male that just hates the world and wants to control it. Did you see it then, which I would say, what, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, in that time frame, that's where things started just to go crazy, and what we deemed as masculine, as me as a kid growing up, which was a positive thing, watching my dad hold the car door open for my mom,
Right.
watching even my grandfather, out of respect for somebody else, say sir or ma'am when he was 70. Do you think that's where we started to lose it, was then, when I don't know, when men started believing they were women?
Gosh,
And
I think we probably started going off the rails way before then. Just sitting here trying to think about it. I don't know that I can really isolate it, but
I mean, you're not going to be able to isolate
yeah,
exact point in time.
I say we started going off the rails as a culture, with the way we viewed masculinity and femininity. I'd say we probably started going off the rails more like in the 70s, but it's been such a slow gradual, you think about the the cliche, the metaphor about the frog in the boiling water.
Yeah.
Right. It's just been getting warmer by just 1 degree a year. And so it's pretty easy to adapt to it and just be like, oh, it's not that bad. This is just one little thing. Oh, that's just one little thing. It's not a big deal. Oh, that's just one other little thing. It's no biggie. Until you wake up one day and there's a pregnant man emoji on your phone. And you're like, how on earth did we get here? Right? How did we get, and there's like a pregnant man on the cover of Time magazine, and your kids in the supermarket line, like, look, Dad, that's a pregnant man. You're like, no, honey, that's a pregnant woman pretending to be a man. There's no such thing as a pregnant man, and so I think certainly, to your point, it was in these last 4 years that I would say the decline has sharply, precipitated. It's the bottom's just dropped out from under. And it really kind of goes back to, really a post-truth era, when you get people questioning the existence of truth. When people start saying things like, you have your truth and I have my truth, and that's true for you, but that's not true for me, that is a fundamental erosion of an objective truth. And once that's eroded, once everything becomes subjected, everything becomes a matter of opinion. Well, now the bottom's fallen out. Now you can say anything. Now you can
rationalize
you can be a woman,
ridiculous thing.
You can be a unicorn, you can be a yellow submarine. If you have your truth and I have mine. So I think that with that relativism, getting its foot in the door, And relativism sounds really cool, right? It sounds kind of like the peacemaker at the party. Hey man, that's cool. That's your truth. And I got my truth. And it sounds really, surfer vibe, but it's extremely dangerous because once we get rid of truth, then you've lost your entire compass.
Well, then we are fiction. Where it said truth is stranger than fiction. We've just become fiction. It's just ridiculous. So, do you find that on the Men's Alliance groups that you have to address those things? Are these things that people do bring up? Like a guy like me comes in and said, "Man, the world's just all the bottom's falling out. I don't know what to do. I know how I feel, but how do I'm losing my mind here because the truth is not there anymore. So, what does Men's Alliance do to help that? So people aren't going off the rails. They're not losing their minds. Men are not questioning what a man is. And I can see how some can. I mean, you can. What is masculinity? Am I that bad of a person? Am I bad because I'm masculine? And what do you do? How do you approach that? What sort of things do you take from them or take to them to help them get through that? Because being a man is important. We need toxic, not even talk. We just need real men.
That's right. We need real masculinity.
Yeah.
That's the antidote to toxic masculinity. And I think the good news is there's way more good men in America than there are toxic men.
Yeah.
It just may be that the toxic ones are the loudest and have the most TikTok followers.
Oh, I would agree that I would say toxic masculinity is exactly the opposite of what people intended it to. It's the beta male. It's the beta males, the ones that aren't secure in their manhood. It's the insecure ones. It's the ones that have to have all the followers on TikTok. They are the narcissists, to me, those were the ones that started calling guys like myself, we're the toxic ones. Why? Because I don't need 8 million followers. I can just be with my family. I love being a father. I'm a bad person now because I'll punch you in the face if you start something with me. That's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I guess, are you seeing that still up? Guys like with that sort of problem?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of the many things that does get addressed around the fire. And guys do bring up this sort of thing. And I would say we address it kind of indirectly in several very important ways, all of which are extremely simple. So let me back up and just say real quick what Men's Alliance is. Yeah. And then, your listeners will hear how simple this recipe is. So Men's Alliance is tribes of men across the nation that meet weekly for a rugged outdoor 30-minute workout followed by a 30-minute real world devotion around a fire. And we call it a real world devotion because it's not going to be a Bible study. We are a Christian organization, and we believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. But we don't sit around and have a Bible study. We sit around and talk about life, talk about whatever we're going through. So our mission statement is sharpening men to become the husbands, fathers, and leaders God designed us to be. So I think one of the ways that we kind of combat against this notion of toxic masculinity or the beta male in society is literally through a physical workout. And that's kind of how we kick off every tribe. Now, I'll say this. We've got men in their 70s. We've got a couple guys in their early 80s.
Wow.
We've got an amputee. So we're not like a fitness group. You can come with any disability level. It's a do what you can, have fun with it type of thing. But we flip tires and swing sledgehammers and keep it kind of fun. And it's really our icebreaker. I mean, we get the heart rate up and it's intense for 30 minutes, but hey, it's 30 minutes. You can do anything for 30 minutes. And then we grab our water bottles and sit down around the fire, and different guys take turns leading every week. So you never know what you're going to get for the workout or the Devo. You never know what you're in for when you show up. But I think I've described it to people. I've invited guys before, and I tell them like, hey, we're going to do like a 30-minute outdoor workout and then a devotion around a fire. And like, I had a young guy, like I would call him a millennial. He was like, he goes, like, literally a workout. Like, I don't know what the figurative
Yeah.
workout is, but he was just blown, like, literally, you're going to work out.
I mean, you're not going to
Like-
give me the VR goggles and we're
Yeah.
not going to simulate this
That's
workout?
right. We're not, yeah. This is not a VR experience. We're going to literally work out, man. Come join us. And we had a young guy come out and he just absolutely loved it. He was kind of mid-20s, really out of shape, super scared of coming out there. Big kudos to him for coming out. You know, he was afraid it was going to be a bunch of Chris Perantos, you know, that he was gonna have to work out with, that we're gonna smoke him, right?
Man, hey, I'm getting a new hip in a month, so that day, those days are gone. I've broken my body 8 billion times. I made another major surgery in 2 years. So, but yeah, in the past, maybe that was the truth in the past. Except for being the dick, I wouldn't have judged him. I'd have, come on, man, come
you know,
on.
he
out.
was
Let's help
so
you.
blown away at the end of it. I said to him as we were kind of all walking to our cars, I was like, "So, what'd you think of it? How'd you enjoy this?" And he goes, "Man, this was so good. I had no idea it was going to be this amazing." And this was the guy who had said when I invited him, "I don't know." And I go, "Why not? What do you not know about?" And he goes, "Well, you know, toxic masculinity and everything." Like, there was not a complete sentence. He didn't formulate like a complete thought. He just said the word. He was, well, you know, toxic masculinity and everything. Like, no, I don't know. What does that mean? What do you mean by that? But I think, back to your original question, one of the ways we combat this is by kind of acknowledging, both explicitly and implicitly, that strength is good and you're designed correctly, right? And I think there's this general confusion in our country when it comes to gender and a lot of other things. And I think people feel like maybe they're a mistake, like something about them is off, something about them is wrong. Like, I look like a man, but I don't feel like one. Maybe I'm not really one. You're designed just right. You're perfect. God designed you exactly how he wants you to be. You need to lean into it, right? And I think we've got a lot of men in this country that are a little bit scared to lean into it. And they really want kind of permission to. They want to be in that group. They secretly, whether they admit it or not, they want to be with a group of barbarians around a fire, swinging sledgehammers and giving war cries. But they know how bad that would sound to say at the coffee shop. So they're going to pretend that they're above this Men's Alliance thing. But when they come out and they experience it, they're like, daggum, this is awesome. So by just kind of leaning into masculinity and strength, and, you know, it's important to have a place. This is a very timely message considering Boy Scouts in the news.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, but we'll get to it.
It's important to have places in society that are just for men.
Sure.
And just for women. It's important to have those distinct places. You know this, you're going to know this, and your listeners are going to know this. Like, as soon as I say this, when you're sitting around anywhere, in your man cave, in a bar, around a campfire, when you're sitting around with a bunch of your buddies that are all dudes, you're all sitting around talking, one guy's wife comes walking into that group, comes walking into that room, you know exactly what I'm saying, right?
The tone changes.
The whole thing just changes. Even if it didn't change out loud, it just changed in everybody's mind, right? There's something about that dynamic that just changed. And now, as soon as that woman is present, no guy is now going to be open and honest and real about his struggles.
It's out of a lot of times now with me, when my wife already knows, like, my wife's coming in, guys, stop talking. I'll say it out loud just to be funny. And she knows it's just me. That's Tano being Tano. And she rolls her eyes, but it comes down a lot of times in especially out here in the Midwest, when it's respect. It is, she's coming in. All right, guys, tone it down. Tone down the language.
Even if
Tone down the
there's
language.
respect, I think it's also just, yeah, as you said, subconsciously
So-
you're going to change. But I wanted to make sure we get into this because we're getting into a lot of things. I do want to get into Boy Scout things. I think that's huge.
Hey, do we?
But
And we got to get into his background too, because
yeah, that's exactly what I'm about to
okay,
do.
Cool.
I was going to say, like, we don't really get a chance to get into who you are prior to forming all this, your Air Force background. So yeah, tell us a little bit about who David Mills is. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah, man. So I did 20 years in the Air Force, which, you know, the Air Force is very similar to the military. It's not quite, but we're close. We get to
I've
hang
never
out
heard this.
with
It's a
the
funny line, though.
military. You know, you know, the Air Force that I entered, I'll tell you this, when I commissioned in 02, very different Air Force from leaving in 2022. But had a great experience. They trained me to be a navigator. When I got out of college, joined the Air Force, didn't know what that was.
So you're a goose, man. You're a goose.
Yeah, that's why all these civilians in Men's Alliance started calling me Goose. And you know, to any Air Force brother out there, I apologize that they're calling me Goose, guys. It was totally out of my hands. So yeah, so I navigated reconnaissance planes. Nothing sexy, just big 4-engine Boeing planes flying in hours and hours of circles over the battlefield, right? So me and the two pilots, we're just taking the back end of the plane to work, right? We're kind of like their bus drivers. We got the back end is full of some really smart folks doing some really amazing gee whiz things, and I'm just trying to keep them away from thunderstorms and airliners, and rendezvous with our tankers every couple hours. So, you know, I joined in 02. My first deployment over Afghanistan was 05. Yeah, that's right. Couple trips over there in 05 and 06, and then I went to the Pacific in 07. Then I switched over when I came back to the States in 10, started flying J-Stars, which is, you know, really synced up directly with the Army. You flying with a couple of soldiers in the back, and they're talking to their ground units, and you're able to chat online, and you're texting in like chat rooms with, you know, the JSOC and with some dude on the ground. He'll be like John Madden, like drawing on the screen, like I'm in this clump of trees.
That is so cool. You can
Call
do that
strike
now.
in here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
the
is
technology was awesome.
Yeah.
So I mean, I did that and I had fun. Then I went to Defense Contract Management Agency where I flew a desk and retired out of that. But you know, the real important part of my story is none of that. The important part of my story is that, let me see, 9.5 years ago now, I think it was, my marriage was about to end. Like, I had 2 kids, I had 2 sons, and things were not going well. I was not a good guy. My marriage was unraveling, and I made the decision that turns out to be like one of the most important decisions of my life, was to go get counseling. And thank God I wound up, because I know, you know, there's good counselors and bad counselors out there. And God led me to a phenomenal one. And this guy wound up, you know, changing my life. I did a 180. My marriage is now better than it's ever been. And then about 2 years after that, I am realizing that, you know what, in order to stay on this new course that I'm on, in order to not drift back into being the old me, I'm going to have to surround myself with some like-minded Christian warriors. And I was going to a church at the time, and you know, we tried out some small groups, you know, is what churches call them, me and my wife, and we went to some small groups, and, you know, it was like everybody was in somebody's living room eating coffee cake, pretending that they read the chapter for the week and pretending like they didn't just have a huge fight with their wife on the drive over to that house. And and I was just like sick of it. I was like, this isn't working. Quite honestly, this is bull crap. And I know I'm struggling and I've got problems, and I'm betting all these other guys do too, and we're not talking about it. And so that's what led me to realize, like, what I need in my life is I need to be in a men's group that's real and doesn't pretend they're fine. And I want it to meet outside around a fire, and what the heck, we should work out first, So that's how it started. And I just created this little group of guys. It was 5 of us on the first night, and worked out, had a great devotion around a fire, and had no master plan for growing this thing into a national ministry. But what's happened is it's resonated so much with so many men. Guys are like, that's what I need. Help me start one of these at my church or in my community or at my American Legion post or whatever. And so we're just helping guys do this. And the growth has just been really God just spreading this fire. But it all started out of the big need in my life, because I saw how easily, I think guys, this is an important part. Guys don't ruin their lives by making some huge 180 one day, right? You don't wake up in the morning and just pull a 180. What you do is you wake up every morning and you allow yourself to tolerate 1 degree. And you tolerate being 1 degree off course in your life. And then you tolerate another degree off course. And then one day you wake up and you are 180 degrees out from being that man you wanted to be. And you're like, how on earth did I get here? So I knew that in order to prevent that drift from happening again, because I was like, I know I got 1 chance left with my wife. I just took it. There's no more, I can't afford to blow this. I can't screw this up. I got to stay on course. So I was like, I need a band of brothers that's going to walk life with me, do life with me, be there for me. You got to do life so close with a guy that he knows when something's wrong with you. And he can just tell it.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're relying on me to be honest with you, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to lie. Right? You're going to be like, hey, Dave, how you doing? I'm going to say, I'm good, man. Thanks for asking. But you've got to know me well enough. And that only comes through weekly connection, weekly tribes, to where you can say, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Bullshit. You're not fine. Tell me what's really going on. Right. And so that was there's the long version for you, but that was the impetus behind how this thing got started, how I found that I needed it in my own life as I came out of the Air Force. And then, so I've been out for almost 2 years now, and we're at 93. This month, we're launching our 93rd tribe. So
wow.
we're in about 20 or so states, and we're connected with about 70 some churches. And like I said, Tribe 93 is launching this month. So we are just helping get these things going and training these leaders. And now
Can I just say this is so synchronistic that I look
Full-time.
behind me and I see 93. I'm like, right? It's pretty cool.
Good.
But keep going. Sorry.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, so that's what's happening, and I would say this, like the workout piece and the fire, that's the highly visible aspects of Men's Alliance, right? That's what you can see. And that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. But when you start coming or you get into one, you realize like there's a lot of kind of robust training that's taken place below the surface. So we don't just do the same thing every week and do a workout and a devotion. What we're doing is, first, we're training a guy to lead. So we get men off the sidelines and into that band of brothers, into that tribe. And then we want him to start leading in it. So we want a guy to lead one of the workouts. We want him to lead one of the devotions. And for some guys, that is the scariest thing in the world. And it's funny because some guys are terrified to lead the workout. Some guys are terrified to lead the devotion. And so we want you to lead both. We want you to, and we help guys. And some guys are just natural leaders and it's no big deal. They knock it out of the park without batting an eye. And then other guys, it's a big deal. So we want to turn a guy from a guy who's asleep in life on the sideline to a guy who is getting out of his comfort zone and leading. The ultimate goal here is to get that guy leading at home. Our goal is to get that guy leading his family, leading his wife and kids, leading them spiritually, being the husband and father that God designed him to be. And one of the things we know is that there's an enemy in this world. There's an enemy here, and he has this great tool in his playbook, and it's a lie that he whispers into every man's ear, and that's the lie that you are not qualified to lead. You have screwed up too much. And, Satan wants to play back our biggest failures to us daily, to use those to keep us on the sideline with our mouth shut, right? Who are you to step up and lead anybody? You are looking at porn, you're drinking too much, you're cheating on your wife, you're doing whatever. You need to keep your mouth shut. You're not qualified to lead. Well, here's the thing. No man is perfect. So whether you've got big sins in your closet or little sins in your closet, he's going to use that same line no matter what you've got. And that's why men have largely across society, they've abdicated their responsibility and they're kind of checked out and they're numbing themselves with comfort on the sidelines.
So do you think it's so they're saying I'm not good enough, so I'm just basically quit. They're quitting. I'm not good enough because I've sinned. So to hell with it. I'm just not. Is that what you're saying?
My wife and kids won't listen to me. They know that, I lose my temper. They know that, my wife knows that I've got this problem or that problem, and my kids have seen me, screw up this and that. So what we've got to do is we've got to come into leadership. And Chris, this is the exact same thing as leading men in the military. You've got to come in humble. You got to come into this thing from a position of, hey guys, I know that I'm not perfect. I don't know everything that there is to know.
Sure.
And I've messed up before, and y'all know all about that. I'm not claiming to be perfect, but here's this one thing that I've learned today, and I want to share it with you guys. Check this out.
Yeah.
Right. When you come into leadership from that perspective, it's not a top down condescending, I'm the expert talking to you guys. It's hey, I'm right here in the trenches. Let me shine a light onto some of the rocks that I have personally crashed into in my life, because I don't want you to crash into them. When we come into it from that perspective, that's what we're teaching men in Men's Alliance is that's how you can lead your family in a devotion, in a prayer. That's how you can start to lead them to church on Sunday. That's how you can be the spiritual leader, is by owning your mistakes. Don't hide them. Put a spotlight on them and step up and lead anyway. We say a lot, you're not perfect. Neither is anybody else. Lead anyway. So that's part of it. We get the men leading. And then the third part that I won't get too far into here, but we have a course that we put men through called Carry the Fire. And that's kind of like our capstone thing. And it's a 10-week deal of training men how to answer the toughest questions that your teenage and college age kids can ask you about your faith, the toughest questions you could imagine being asked about what you believe, we train men how to confidently, calmly, articulately answer those questions and lead their families spiritually. And dude, that is the most fun thing that we do in Men's Alliance, is that carry the fire. So it's about 10 weeks long, and we end it with a 3-day FTX out in the field, around a lot of big fires and some really fun leadership challenges. And I've only been able to do this because, like, literally God has brought so many incredible leaders into my life that we're already at the point where Men's Alliance has surpassed me. Like, Men's Alliance has taken off and I'm just on the ground waving to it. And, you know, we've got guys who have, retired E8s, E9s that are out there putting together these FTXs, and guys from, civilian industry, entrepreneurs, guys who know how to run these events. So we're now at this position where we're putting on this. And so we bring men from that first time where they're flipping a tire and they're a little out of their comfort zone, to then they're leading and they're leading their family. And then they're going to carry the fire, where they're really getting that next level training.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying this interview with David Goose Mills of Men's Alliance. We actually do talk a little shooting in here. And if you are a shooter and you're not shooting with Fort Scott munitions, I don't know why not. I got my Fort Scott munitions here just to keep on my desk, just because it looks cool. But it's actually the best ammo.
It is. And I got tons of it up here, plus the big sign. Plus I just went out shooting this weekend with FSM ammo. It is by far the best ammo out there, by far.
Yeah. So check them out. Fort Scott Munitions is a manufacturer of multi-federal patented solid copper and brass CNC spun ammunition. It's designed to tumble upon impact, TUI, in soft tissue, leaving devastating wound channels for faster bleed out and quicker incapacitation. This ammunition was originally developed to innovate and improve on the standard of military-grade ammunition design. It was found that not only did the TUI ammunition outperform competitors in the self-defense industry, but it quickly became apparent that it will be a top contender for hunters alike. With the ammunition being CNC spun, the tolerances are some of the tightest on the market, ensuring that you receive the same results with each pull of the trigger. Fort Scott Munitions is available throughout privately owned businesses everywhere in all 50 states, but you're going to get the best deal through us when you go to fsm.com and you use the promo code BattleLine for 15% off your order. Only available to listeners of the BattleLine podcast. Fort Scott Munitions is a proud supporter of Chris Peranto, BattleLine Tactical, and the BattleLine podcast. Once again, guys, fsm.com, promo code BattleLine. With that, let's get right back to our interview with David Mills.
Those questions, who gets you those questions? Where do those come from? Like,
oh man,
the teenage, I mean, do they just pull from everybody? And then who decides that? I mean, there's so many different questions.
There are.
Teenagers
and
are
you
so many
can't,
different.
yeah, you're right. And you can't be like all 100% inclusive on these questions. You're going to miss a few, but what we found is that most questions, they kind of fall into one of three big buckets. So you might phrase them different and they might come from different angles, but they're kind of either in this category or this category or this category. So if you can learn how to address these couple big categories, then you can kind of see how to respond. Because the way this got started was I had several friends, and they were like all different friends, didn't know each other. And it was like all within like the same like 2-week period of my life. I was hearing from one guy, he was like, "Hey man, I don't know what's going on." He was like, "I raised my family in church. We were in church every Sunday. My daughter just came home from university and she's like, 'Dad, I'm an atheist now.'" And he's like, "Dude, what do you say to that? How do you respond to that?" And then another buddy said something almost the exact same thing. He was like, "My son's like a senior in high school." And he's like, how do we know that the Bible wasn't just made up?" And I'm like, these are great questions, right? And I think Christians in general and churches across America, unfortunately, have like stifled a lot of these questions. And they're like, you shouldn't ask that. You should just have faith. Right. And then kids are smart. Kids are taking AP calculus. They're thinking. They're not dumb. And so if you suppress the questions, they think that there's no answers. And really, that's just lazy parenting. There's answers. People have been writing these answers for thousands of years, but you have to do the work to go read and find these answers. There are answers to all the world's big questions, and they're wonderful answers, and they make you think, and they're coherent. But we have to do the work as parents. And so let's be honest, none of us are going to go start reading Thomas Aquinas and studying, apologetics. So I wanted to make it easy and create like a Cliff's Notes version, put this stuff into a layman's terms, put it into a field manual that you can give to dads, that's going to have, I think we've got about 18 or so of like the most common ones that high schoolers and college students ask. So we've covered the big ones. And when you learn those, what happens is you become a better ambassador for Christ. And that's what we're called to be, right? So I think about it like this. If you were going to be the ambassador from America to, I don't know, let's say China, don't you think you would want to know what are the most common questions that they always ask every American ambassador? Right? I'm sure it's pretty much the same common questions for everybody all the time. They're not really coming up with new stuff. It's just repackaged. Well, the same thing is true for our faith. So we're really building men who go against culture, go against society, like we started out talking about, combating all of this, push to suppress your masculinity, hide your strength, pretend that, you're not an alpha male. And so we're training men to swim against that current. And we call that barbarians, because a guy who goes against the prevailing culture is a barbarian to that culture. And then we're training men to be ambassadors who can, share their faith.
Yeah.
So that's why we call what we're doing, we call it training barbarian ambassadors.
And by the way, everything that you're saying resonates with what you said earlier about that. This is why men need to meet together without women present, and it's interesting because I had Evan Seinfeld on the podcast when Chris wasn't here, and he's doing something similar to you with mentorship, except what he's doing is completely secular. So that's going to appeal to a different person than what you're doing. Right. But what he spoke about, and the same thing you're speaking about, is like men are all very similar, and we struggle with certain things that guys who are married are not going to tell their wives about, or they're not going to tell women in their lives about, and they might not even tell their personal best friends about, but they can go to a men's alliance meeting and say, I'm struggling with this. And you may think you're special, but chances are, as men, we're all struggling with pretty much the same stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, totally right.
Something came up while you're talking, and I wasn't going to ask because I didn't think about this question before you came on, and it just kind of hit me. I've had a few buddies that have taken their own lives because of toxic relationships. And I sitting here talking to you, why is it the men are the ones that have the problems? It's the men that have to watch themselves and be careful. That it's the men that are toxic. When I've even had my own bad relationship where I had a toxic woman in my life that literally drove me to where I wanted to end it all. Why is it us? Why are we the ones that seem to have that burden? We're the ones that have the groups. We're the ones that have that responsibility, the blame. And believe me, I'm not a victim. I don't play a victim. I don't think if you have any masculinity at all, you're never a victim. You shouldn't be seen as a victim. But why is it that we have these groups? That you don't see a women's alliance group, or do you? Maybe
there actually is. There actually is.
There?
There's a wife of a guy in Men's Alliance that started Women's Alliance, and it's doing pretty well and coming right behind us, and starting Women's Alliance tribes at a lot of our locations. But kind of to your question, I think there's probably a couple reasons that men are really getting hit hardest, especially when it comes to things like divorce. One of which I think is the fact that men too often try to shoulder that load alone. They just don't, they're just not talking about it. And even when they go out with some buddies, they're not being real. They're not being honest. They're not really sharing about it. They're just talking about sports and saying they're fine. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons is men are trying to shoulder it alone. Men are all too often isolated. They've bought into that Lone Ranger myth, right? That they just need to suck it up, that they just need to be tougher. Just tighten the lid down more. Just tighten that lid and don't bring it out. Don't let it out. Well, really, that's the formula right there for an explosion.
Yeah.
Well, because we're taking a blame for something that we don't have a blame for. That's my opinion.
The second thing that I would say now, and this one I'm just going to touch the surface on because this is a whole podcast, but the system is rigged against men. I'll just say that. I'll just put it that way.
You're right.
When it comes to custody of children, you know, I've had friends in Men's Alliance thrown in jail, you know, because they went to see their son on his eighth birthday, you know, and that boy's mom is cruel and mean and set that up in a way that she knew would bait him into trying to see his son, and she could call the cops and get him. So there is that. I mean, you call the cops on a man, the police are taking him, you know, if you lie about it or you set him up. And so the courts, and I'll just say this to your listeners, if you doubt any of this, or if you just want to learn more about what I'm saying, check out the documentary called The Red Pill. The Red Pill is an insanely great documentary done about men's rights in America. And it's actually the documentary is made by a feminist. It's made by a lady who's a feminist. And so you really can't say that it's got any bias to it. It's really well done. But I think that's a big part of it. So, but here's the thing. We can't do anything about that half of the problem.
Yeah.
That half of the equation is out of our control. So we can look at it, we can acknowledge it, look it in the eye. But the first part of the problem that I said, that's the part that we have control over. So that's where probably the best thing that a man can do is have that band of brothers that he's doing life with. Because, man, I'll tell you what, that makes a heavy load a million times lighter. A lot of times when a man opens up and shares around a fire, there's another guy that's going to speak up and be like, man, I went through that 5 years ago, brother. Let's me and you go get lunch tomorrow.
And when he tells you you need to run away, you run.
Yeah.
I had buddies Ranger buddies that's what they were saying to me personally. And I even said that to a Ranger buddy who went through that same thing that you just talked about with custody of kids, where his wife's a drug addict. He finally got custody of his kids. It's been 10 years, but he was thrown into prison trying to help and get his sons out of that, with his wife being the But it was a friend. There was two friends telling me for 2 years, get out of there, dude. This is awful. You need. And of course, as men, we don't listen. We're like, nah, we're not. Or you're so in love that you don't understand it. You're exactly right. It was another men, and it wasn't a men's group, but I had close Ranger buddies that were telling me, and I finally did listen. And oh shit, I saw it, got it out. And I guess I took the red pill then, or did I take the blue pill? Whichever. I took one of the pills. But you're spot on, and that's why I'd ask, because there have been two of my buddies that did take their lives because of manipulation. And I just,
although at the end of the day, I do think there's also the personal responsibility there, because no one could make you take your life except yourself.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I don't,
No one could drive you to do
We've
that
got
except
a
yourself.
we've got a lot of men in Men's Alliance who have
I don't know
been
if I agree with that,
on
man.
that point. They've been on that brink. They've had the
that-
gun to their heads, you know, and they're still here. You
Yeah.
know,
And
they're here today.
I'm one. You're, and
Yeah.
Ian's right. Ian, no, he has a point because I'm that guy. I'm that, hey, nope, putting that shit down and putting a gun in. It was my choice to put it down. But I think somebody can be driven that far to where it becomes, and then you're right, Ian. It is that decision whether to pull the trigger or not. But just driving him to that point to do this, or to drive their motorcycle 100 miles down the road.
But
you
that
know,
also goes
hoping-
to the weak men thing, right? Because I think a
Well,
strong man would be like, hey, what do I have control over to fix this situation? How do I write
yeah.
this? How do I get this ship straight? You know, like, so
And
I
that's why
do
we got
this-
That's why we got David on, because he
Yeah,
did.
I mean,
he
I
did,
I
man.
think there has
Yeah.
to be that element of personal responsibility in anything that no one could drive you to do something that horrific to yourself. But yeah, you could have those emotions, and that's why it is important to have groups like doing, you know, the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so important what you're doing to meet with other guys. And that's why I said there's a lot of people right now with parallel thinking of all these
Mhm.
situations of like, whatever that they're struggling with, they need someone to talk to. And sometimes it's probably better to meet with guys who aren't their best friends that they grew up with, and they're
Yeah.
able to open up to someone almost anonymously. So I think it's great what you're doing. I really do.
Thanks. You know, another aspect of Men's Alliance that I would say is just kind of reflecting me in it, in the organization, is I love God, but I don't really love being an inside church. And this is something that I think most Christians feel like afraid to say this out loud. Right? It's like if you love God, you've got to pretend like you love church. And I'm like, you know what? I felt like I felt like a really bad Christian for several years, because I'm like, man, I'm just not getting into this thing with everybody else. But you know, I realized, like, listen, you can worship God outside around a fire, right? And that can be church. And turns out that, you know, the word church is not a building, right? The
Yeah.
word church is a group of people. So anytime you are sitting around a fire at a Men's Alliance with your tribe, man, that's your church right there. That's church. So I think a big part of this kind of movement, that's kind of like we're giving voice to something that a lot of people have felt for a long time, but nobody was saying, is, listen, it's okay to love God and not love getting dressed up and singing in a room with 1,000 people. That cannot be your thing. That's okay. And maybe that's your thing. You know, my podcast co-host is Shadow, and he sings on stage. He leads the worship team. So we got nothing against that. We love that as well. But I don't think anybody needs to say that, because that's 99%. But what we need to do is give voice to the guys like me, that would rather sit outside and smoke a cigar and, you know, talk with their band of brothers. I think we need to understand as a culture that that is church. It just looks different. It looks different. It sounds different, but it's just as important, and it's just as worshipful. And I don't think God has a favorite. I don't think God cares if you have a steeple on your building.
Yeah. And you know, I agree. And you know what else I wanted to mention is earlier in the show, you said how going to therapy changed your life. And I'm sure we'll get
Yeah.
into the Boy Scouts thing. And, you
Yeah.
know, we are harping on some of the negatives of things that
Yeah.
have happened. But I think one of the positives, I guess, would say is that we don't have this antiquated view anymore, which you kind of spoke on earlier, that going to therapy and talking about your problems, that's not masculine. And unfortunately, like a lot of the Vietnam guys we've lost, they're
Right.
from that generation where that's not masculine. You don't go in a room with someone and talk about your issues. I, like yourself, I did go to therapy at like the worst part of my life, and it turned out to be a huge positive for me. And like you, I went to someone who was great in that I said I don't want to be on medication. They didn't force me to go on any medication.
Yeah.
And I actually wasn't the one who voluntarily was like, I'm done with this. Our session started to talk about other things. And he was like, you know what?
Yeah.
I think you're good. If you ever need me, give me a call, but I
Yep.
think you're fine. And I
It
was like,
reached
this
a
is,
natural end.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is a good person because it's not someone who just endlessly wants my money.
Yeah.
So yeah, speak about that. The fact that in 2024, it is okay to be a masculine man who goes to therapy.
Yeah, I feel like that's one thing we've done a really great job of as a society is we have completely removed the stigma of therapy. And when people talk about we need to remove the stigma, I'm like, brother, we can check that box off. That stigma is removed. Everybody's talking about their therapy all the time. So we've done that. But the thing is now it's what's next. It's like, okay, so we removed that stigma and we all went and got some counseling. Now what? How do I live the rest of my life? Right? How do I live 40 more years? Hopefully I've got, about 35 to 40 years left. And like you said, it's not going to be endlessly going to counseling. So counseling is kind of like that defibrillator that shocks you back into where you should be. And then you come away from, 6, 7, 8 sessions, whatever. And you're like, okay, I got my head on straight. I see some of the errors in my previous ways of thinking, and I've got some good tools in my tool bag now.
Yeah.
For how to make sure that I don't do those things again. Great. I'm going forward. But then now what? And I think that's the part is a culture where I believe that the now what is find your band of brothers. That's what you do now is you do life with a tribe, whether it's Men's Alliance or it's whatever.
Yeah.
I went to a coffee shop this morning with my dad who's 80, and there were all the tables in this little diner that we went to. They were all full of guys that were in their 80s, and they're all wearing their VFW hats, and tables of 4 and 3 and 4 and 5 all around. And I'm just looking around this diner and I'm like, these old guys all have a tribe, right? Like each guy, he's got his tribe. That's his tribe. But here's the thing. I think, and I could be wrong here and I hope I am, but you see that with the old guys. I don't know that the younger generations are doing that as well.
They aren't, brother. They aren't at all. And that's what we kind of full circle what we started with is that that's how we grew up. I grew up going to the old barber shop where the old guys, I'd get my hair cut as a kid, and the old guys with my dad be sitting there talking. That's where they hung out. It's cliche, maybe like a movie, but we did that in Alamosa, Colorado. And the kids don't even drink coffee anymore, dude.
Yeah.
It's not, you can't, I mean, they have their whatever the power drinks they're drinking. So of course they're not even going to go sit around at a diner and talk and have breakfast. And I do think that's a suffering because that was the guys' man groups growing up. And I got to see that. Yeah. And I do that a little bit, but I don't even do that a ton.
I'll be truthful though. I feel like I still see it in places that you wouldn't even expect. Do you know how many great conversations, truthfully, I've had with other guys after a workout in the sauna?
Yeah.
About the same type of stuff we're talking about.
I knew you were going to say after some sort of physical exercise.
Right?
I was thinking you were probably going to say
all
after
different
a
types of
basketball
things.
game or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And whether it's struggling with the same things that you spoke about. I'm having these issues with my wife or at my house, or even you said with pornography. Like when guys are together in a sauna after they just had an excruciating workout, they feel more apt to open up. It's cool. And it actually, it ends up making my sauna experience longer. Because you're like, I want to keep this conversation going. I'm going to stay here for 20 minutes. And I've made great friends that way. So I do think these men's groups still pop up naturally. And I do see guys at the gym who are 20, 30, 40, and sometimes even older. And same type of things you've talked about. I've seen guys at the gym who are shredded as fuck and are amputees. And it inspires me, So.
Well, I think, to your point, what you described, you totally described a Men's Alliance. Like go work out and then sit around a sauna. Man, that's Men's Alliance. That's just an indoor one.
Yeah.
And I know that like some guys, like their tribe, their band of brothers is they play a pickup game of basketball every single week, and they've been playing it with the same guys. And then but you got to have that, sauna part or that diner part or that devotion part. You got to have that moment where after you've done the workout or the basketball or whatever, the softball, you got to have that moment where you sit around and you get real like you're having. And, it doesn't matter what a guy does, but it has to be, and studies show this, it has to be a physical activity. Like it doesn't matter what it is. You can play softball or you can go bowling. Bowling leagues used to be the thing, right?
Yeah.
And where you can flip tires, whatever it is. But men connect after a shared physical struggle. Those are the key components. It has to be a shared physical struggle. And you think about this, and I know your listeners will get this. Usually the best friend you've ever had in your life, you either made in the military or in high school football, right? Like if you played like a sport together and you did those 2-a-days, man, you just bonded instantly with a dude you had nothing in common with, same as basic training. So there's got to be that aspect, and that's what we replicate at Men's Alliance. There's something magic that happens when you run around with a telephone pole for a few minutes with a guy, and then you sit down around the fire, you're best friends, and now you're sharing stuff. But if you would have just got out of your car and walked over and sat down around the fire, it wouldn't be the same. You wouldn't share. You wouldn't have that bond. That's kind of the secret sauce. I don't know. I can't explain how it happens. I just know that that's what happens. And that's why the workout part is so important, regardless of whatever it is.
I didn't know there was a Boy Scout. I wanted to get into that Boy Scout.
Oh yeah,
thing.
can I just say one other thing?
Yeah,
before the
yeah,
Boy
do your
Scouts
thing, because I'm intrigued. Like, what that?
Yeah,
with the
let's
Boy
talk
Scouts?
about that. But I just I guess to say one last thing about what you just said about men doing physical activity and then doing something to calm down, and that's how we bond. I mean, you were talking earlier about how the system is kind of rigged against men. I would say that starts from the very moment you enter a classroom. I know I'm not the only one who had this experience.
For
They
sure.
said that I had attention deficit disorder.
Yeah.
They put me on Metadate and Ritalin, and I'm already a pretty thin dude, and I was not able to eat. I was losing weight. I was getting irritable by the time it wore off. And it's because as men, we want to run around and like do things. We don't want to be in a classroom listening to someone lecture. And so all these younger boys, right, who are my age group, millennials, we were all told we had trouble paying attention. Yet I could hang on to your every word as I'm doing this podcast. Maybe it's just that I was bored out of my mind and I was listening to someone drone on. And as men, like just that whole setting of a classroom, I don't think it applies very well to men. And we'd have to change the whole structure of everything, right?
That's right. You got to change the entire
to
system.
men. Why are more women going to college? So many things, right?
You are so right, man. You are so spot on. I went through the same kind of struggles with my sons. I remember going to one of my son's parent teacher conferences. This was like second grade, I think, second or third grade. And the teacher was like, I want to talk to you guys about your son's attention. And I remember going into this classroom, the second grade classroom, and there were so many, like a ludicrous amount, absolutely ridiculous amount of brightly colored signs, posters, and banners covering every square inch of this wall and stuff hanging from the ceilings. I got ADD just walking in that room. I nearly had a seizure. And I'm like, I don't know how any of your second grade boys sit in this room all day, right? They need to be freaking running around in the woods, right? You need to have them mud wrestling and making spears. And that's what they want to do. And I bet you anything, then they'll sit and listen when they get worn out. They get all that out of their system.
It's crazy. I remember when I visited Colorado. I know Chris is from Colorado. I did a bunch of stuff solo. I went to Rocky Mountain National Park. I did Garden of the Gods, and I saw this father behind me as I was doing Garden of the Gods. And as they're walking, looking at all this beautiful, nature, he was telling his kids all this different historical stuff, and I could tell they were hanging on to his every word. So it was like eavesdropping a little bit, and I was like, this is how people should probably learn out in nature. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be in a classroom every day.
Yeah.
And there needs to, I don't know if it'll ever happen, but there needs to be some fundamental change in how we learn,
Well,
because that doesn't appeal to all of us.
when we grew
That's
up,
right.
and I don't know if it's like this anymore, and especially we're in Virginia where you're at, but field trips. I still remember
Yeah.
the field.
Yeah.
That's where we learned, and
Yeah.
luckily for us here where we live in Kansas, and he goes to a little private Christian school. They still do field trips. He's still talking about going and seeing the bald eagles and the golden eagles that they
Nice.
saw a couple weeks. But do they still are? Since you're talking about your son and his
Yeah.
class, does that still happen? Do you have fathers that in your area that the field trips and they're still taking up? Because I'm in total agree with Ian. That's you want to run around. We got to have the kids out playing.
Very few. I
Wow.
mean, these things are so rare now. Just hearing you say that, I'm like, oh yeah.
I can't remember.
You know, my oldest son, you know, a long time ago, I guess about 8 or 9 years ago, he went on a field trip to DC, and I went with him as like one of the chaperones. And that was the last time I remember that happening. You know, because we're here in Richmond, usually
Yeah.
if you go through 4 years of high school here, you'll get one field trip to DC. That might be your only field trip in 4 years. You know, it's not like it used to be. So I think
those are when kids will remember. They'll remember everything
that's
about
right.
that trip.
Yeah, I think in addition to, the environment, and like you said, we got to completely change the entire system if we think, that boys are ever gonna, uh, catch up and excel and thrive in a public school environment. We have to change the environment. The boy's not broken, the environment is broken, and because the girls are doing a better job, of sitting still and being quiet, schools are treating boys like they are broken girls,
Yeah.
right? They're treating them like they're a girl that something's wrong with. It's like, why can't you just be more like Susie, right? Well, one day you're probably not going to ask Susie to go into combat. So don't ask Billy to act like her now, right? And we've got to, this goes back to understanding gender and identity, and that people are uniquely made and they're uniquely designed. And there are things that take place in the womb chemically that changes that baby into either a girl or into a boy. And you can't deny that later on when they're in second grade, right? You can't pretend that they're interchangeable. It's like, man, they've been different since before they saw daylight, right? Their brains have been bathed in different chemicals since before they were born. So just very different design from the beginning. And as soon as we go back to a sane society that knows that and recognizes that and says it out loud and is like, hey, women can do things that men cannot do, and men can do things that women cannot do.
Yeah.
And if we could, not pretend that they're interchangeable, but actually kind of like celebrate their unique roles and differences, I think we would be doing a lot better as a society. And I'll just say this a little bit too. A little bit of it has to do with what we're feeding those kids before they go to school. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you
Oh,
sit
yeah.
down and you're eating a sugary cereal,
Yes.
like my parents fed me every morning, it's like have a bowl of cereal and then go to that classroom, you are screwed, right?
Dude, have you ever read about,
What are you talking about? I grew up on Fruit Loops and Frosted Flakes.
I
No,
know, man.
no,
It-
my mom.
Is it Kellogg? I feel like you would know this, right? Is it Kellogg, the one who decided like why, right? Am I right on that? You know
Yeah.
where I'm going, right?
Yeah,
That basically
yeah,
he
Dr.
wanted men to have low testosterone. You guys
That's
look
right.
this up. And
The
so like instead of eating eggs, he thought like having a sex drive was bad. So it was
Yeah.
like, we're gonna feed men this stuff that is gonna like lower their testosterone,
That did-
lower their sex drive.
That did
Yeah.
really work because I ate Frosted Flakes my whole career growing up, and in high school I was all over the place, dude. So it
Oh
didn't
yeah,
work.
that's because
It
you had the
it didn't
frosted
work.
ones. That
I
doesn't work if they're
know.
frosted. Frosted ruined it. Yeah, Dr.
Am I right that it's
Kellogg.
Kellogg though? I want to make sure I have
Yeah.
this
Well,
right
if it's
because someone's
Frosted
going to fact
Flakes, it's
check me.
Kellogg. It's Kellogg if it's like Frosted Flakes.
Yeah, but
and
was it
all
the
that.
creator? Because it was the creator of the cereal who believed in
Well,
this.
while you're looking at that, the ironic thing, I wanted to say this because you were saying that we got to have men and women are
And it
women,
is
men
Dr.
are
Kellogg.
men are
He
men.
designed it so men would stop masturbating. Truly, I'm not making this up. Yeah.
The irony of it all, in my opinion, that is not going to change unless a woman like a Riley Gaines, like somebody like that, that's speaking out and say, "Hey, women are different, men are different." Those that compete, like my wife, who played competitive college volleyball, who was a player of the year in Division II, says that men are different and women are different. We all have our strengths, but they cannot do the same things. There's different.
Exactly.
But it's not the men that's going to change that, bro. I hate to say
Yeah.
we're the one because the when we say that, somebody right now is going to listen to us goes, those damn toxic men. We just went full circle.
Right.
Those
You're
damn
right.
toxic
It has
males.
to come from the Riley Gaines
That's
and
the irony of
Serena
it all.
Williams. Serena Williams has been a great spokeswoman for this cause, right? She's like, hey, listen, I've been the best, female tennis player in the world. I don't stand a chance against even, a 50th ranked, male tennis player. And people are like, oh, I can't believe she said that. Right. But it's like, yeah, she's being honest. And that's okay. That's why we have women's sports. That's the entire point of Title IX in the first place.
Yeah.
And she's right. Honest, but she's right. She's right. Regardless. Honestly, right.
For sure.
She's right. Yep. Sorry, Ian. Go ahead, bud.
No, it's fine. Same thing you were saying, though. I do want to get into the Boy Scouts thing because I came across it. And it's the type of thing I texted all my friends that I grew up with. I mean, because I was a Cub Scout. I didn't go as far as to do like all the other stuff. But yeah, now the Boy Scouts is officially the Scouts. And
that was only a matter of time.
But it really is because that is like the oldest and the first men's group that you start with, and now that is going away. And this is very troubling.
So are Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts? I mean, I've seen the attacks been going on for years, and then the first Girl Scout that became or for women that became a Boy Scout. So are they combined now, or are they as Scouts and then there's Girl Scouts? Is there what?
I think right now there's still distinctly two things. I think there's Girl Scouts of America. Which is basically, from what I understand, a cookie distributing pyramid scheme.
They do have a monopoly on that, don't they?
And then Boy Scouts of America just recently, this past week changed their name to Scouts of America, which it's only a matter of time now before they drop Scouts. That's going to offend somebody, and the America, that's very nationalistic. I saw a heading on Babylon B that says
oh my goodness,
their name is now of. They dropped the Boy, the Scouts, and the America, and they're just called of. It was the only inoffensive word in their name. But I think that what this comes down to is something called mission drift, and there's a great book written by that title. And you look at a lot of organizations that started out with one mission, and today that organization is not even recognizable when it comes to its original mission. And of course, the Boy Scouts is absolutely one of those organizations you can look at, founded by a Christian. Their original values were all biblical, and they were doing an amazing job. And little by little, it drifts 1 degree at a time to, and another one big example is the YMCA, right? This started off as the Young Men's Christian Association. It's no longer young, no men, no Christian. It's just the association, right? It's a great place to go work out, but it's drifted so far from its mission, and there's a lot of other organizations like that have drifted a lot. By the way, we set up the bylaws for Men's Alliance. We're a 501c3. We set up our bylaws to say that the only way you can change the mission statement of Men's Alliance is to have a unanimous vote by the board of directors for 3 years in a row.
I thought you were going to say you have to have
No.
like a duel to the death. That would be
No.
pretty manly.
The board has to be unanimous. If there's even one person that wants to keep the mission statement, it doesn't change. And then they have to be unanimous every year for 3 years, because that book Mission Drift made me so passionate about Men's Alliance isn't going to drift. We're not going to be a Boy Scouts. We're not going to be a YMCA.
Yeah.
We're sharpening men to be the husbands, fathers, and leaders God designed us to be. And we're not changing that. Right. I had the, speaking of scouts, I had the director of Trail Life USA, which is like a Christian alternative to Boy Scouts. Mark Hancock, he's the founder of Trail Life USA. I had him on the podcast, and I asked him, I said, what are you going to do one day if a girl and her family sue you because she wants in? She wants in Trail Life, and they take you guys to court, and she wins. What are you gonna do? And I mean, without a second of hesitation, Mark said, we end Trail Life USA that day. He was like, we're done. We close the books, we shut the doors, and Trail Life USA doesn't exist. He goes, we're either going to be for boys or we're not going to exist. And we're not going to do this scouts thing. And I loved hearing that. It kind of steeled up my nerve as well, because I'm walking down the same path he is. I'm just a couple years behind him. But I'm like, yeah, absolutely right. So, Men's Alliance can't drift off its mission. We've made it so difficult in its bylaws because I want it to outlast me, right? So when me and all my buddies who are running Men's Alliance, when we're all dead and gone, I want to know that this organization still is on course.
But the fact that in society today that you could sue for something like that, and we've seen it with the gay wedding cake thing, is just insane to me. I mean, because look, I probably don't share the same values as you, but I think when on everything, you know what I'm saying? I agree with a lot of what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think that why can't an organization be a Christian organization, and you can have an organization that's a secular organization? I mean, for example, there's not as many churches that are by Chris. Chris has a ton of churches that be there, but there's a bunch of different churches here in Long Island, New York area, and there is going to be a church that's going to say, hey, we're okay with doing gay marriages, and then there's going to be another church that says that goes against God. We're not going to have gay marriages. And why is that not fine? Why should one of the organizations be sued?
Exactly
and if that church doesn't match your values, I think it's fair enough to say, don't join that church. Join another church that matches your values. And that was the thing with the gay wedding cake. Like, you mean to tell me you can't find a bakery that's going to bake a cake, but you have to harass this Christian baker because they said, yeah, we're not going to do that. And the legal system in America is completely off the rails.
Man, you are 100% right. If a group of female Muslims wants to start, a women's Islam alliance or whatever, great, good for them. They should not be sued either to have a man in there. It's like freedom of religion, right? Let this guy choose to not bake a cake, right? Like, whatever happened to no shirt, no shoes, no service?
Yeah.
Right. It's like, if you're a business owner, you have the right to refuse service to anybody you want. Until now, apparently, now you can't. You got to serve everybody or nobody. But that's the problem with being an organization in today's world of relativism that says you have your truth, I have mine. To try to say we are the Boy Scouts of America. You can't say you're the Boy Scouts of America and espouse relativism, right? You've either got to be one or the other. You can't be Men's Alliance and say, anybody can be a man, anybody can be a woman. That would be incoherent to hold both of those thoughts at the same time. So it's like, I had a great guy, phenomenal leader, tell me a couple years ago. He was like, hey man, you're starting to grow, you're starting to blow up. One thing you need to consider doing is changing your name. He was like, that name is ridiculous. Men's Alliance is going to like put a bullseye on you. And I was like, I absolutely agree with you. It is going to put a bullseye on us. And that's okay, because we're going to go hard and hit the gas pedal until we stop. but we're not going to drift off course to try to please everybody and do this Boy Scouts thing. Because sadly, the Boy Scouts is going to go under now.
Oh yeah.
It's not going to last, because when you try to please everybody, you please nobody.
Yeah.
Right. People want to belong to a tribe. They don't want to belong to a conglomerate. Right. And a tribe, by definition, has people that are in it and people that are not in it. And that's not a bad thing. That's just what a band of brothers is. If you've got a band of brothers, then you've got people that are not in your band of brothers, because if you try to care for every human on earth, you care for nobody. You got to draw your circle and be like, these are my 12 dudes. This is my band.
So we live here. We have choices. That's the beauty of it all. And to agree with both of you, why not? We have choices. That's why I defended this country. That's why we went overseas, so we could have the freedom, whether I agree with you or not.
Right.
I don't have to agree with you, Ian.
I may disagree with what you have to say, but I'll fight for your right to say
for your right to say it, and the choice to have. And if there was a women's Islam alliance, believe me, it wouldn't be the Christians that would be standing in the way of that at all. I guarantee you that. If for those that have not been overseas, I will tell you that right now, it wouldn't be any Christian saying you can't have that. I just want to put that out there, but probably a lot of you already knew that. But
even though, this would be a whole nother subject, but with the protests that we're seeing on college campuses, have you seen the women converting to Islam in defense of Hamas? Like the most secular women that there are now saying I'm a Muslim.
I love
it's insane.
I think maybe the most ironic thing ever is the LGBTQ community that's pro Hamas. That one is the most ironic. I'm like, listen, if you go over there, they will throw you off the rooftop.
I think
they're executing homosexuals in the Middle East. And it's hilarious that in America, we have homosexuals that are like pro Hamas. It's like, what are you doing? That's, that's like the chicken being pro KFC.
Yeah,
that's like, Eddie. I responded to something like that on Twitter. Now I have an Twitter X account again, and I say, you guys believe that? Go to Cabo, go stand in the soccer stadium and wave your flag and see what happens, guys. Just don't study and understand really what you're supporting. It's like to support a cause, just to have a cause, to support a cause, even though you have no idea what that cause is. But maybe that's their tribe, man. We're talking about tribe. Maybe that's the tribe.
You're more right than I think you realize. I heard this past week on a Matt Walsh podcast. So this is not, I'm not claiming this is an original thought, but he was saying protests are the churches of liberals. And I'm like, the longer I thought about that, the more accurate I think it is. He was like, that's their community, that's their support group, that's their social event. And when there's a protest, they go.
It is true, yeah.
A lot of Christians just go to church. And it's like, if you interview some of these protesters and you're like, hey, what do you
they don't know why they're there.
They don't know. But if you ask a lot of Christians coming out of church some theological question, they don't know either. They're like, oh, I don't know, I just came here because of my friend. Right. So it's kind of like a parallel thing. I was like, that's actually pretty good.
That's actually, it is. It's spot on. I'm just laughing. I have to agree. I know the thing panned to me. It's just because it made complete sense. So I was laughing. So got nothing to say though. I got nothing to say.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think this has been a great interview, and hopefully it introduces people to what you're doing. And like I said, it's kind of just funny because I just had Evan Seinfeld on, who's frontman of Biohazard. As crazy as it is, former porn star, married to a porn actress who's no longer doing that anymore, and has now formed mentorship, which I think is very similar to what you're doing, except, it doesn't have the religious aspect necessarily, but I think what he's doing is very positive. I mean, he's now living in Tulum, Mexico, and he's doing these workouts on the beach with all different types of guys, and they're meeting on Discord. And that's why I think there's such a need for this. And what you're doing is going to appeal to a certain guy, and what he's doing is going to appeal to a certain other guy. But I think by and large, and Evan said this when he was on, men are struggling with the same stuff. He's like, men are very similar. We have he said like a little sprinkle of something that makes us different. Like this guy dresses cool, this guy's athletic, but by and large, like the DNA of a man is very similar. And when you're in groups like you're doing with Men's Alliance, you're going to find out your problems are not that unique.
Absolutely agree. And I think an important component of both what he's doing and what we're doing that cannot be replaced is it has to be in person.
Yeah.
You cannot do this virtually. You cannot build, and I've seen a lot of organizations trying to do this. You cannot build a virtual tribe. You can't have an online band of brothers. I mean, you can talk and it's better than nothing, right? It's better than nothing, but man, is it not the same, right?
No.
I think you've got to close your laptop and go put on your shoes and socks and go out the door and go actually meet your buddies. You know, there's something to that good old fashioned in-person component of it.
Yeah, I agree. They have Discord, as I said, but they do the in-person stuff in
Right.
Tulum, Mexico.
On the beach. Yeah.
Which I'll be honest, if I could choose just based on location, Virginia or Tulum, Mexico, Tulum, Mexico looks pretty fucking cool to me. But
well,
yeah.
that's no problem because we'll just get a tribe there. Let's get a Men's Alliance tribe.
That would be cool. Are you guys international? It's just US at this point.
So we've got one in Canada, and actually tomorrow, hilarious, as we're speaking right now on the 15th, tomorrow, May 16th, we're launching our first tribe in Australia. So
congrats,
man. We're not focused on any sort of international expansion. We're focused right here in our own communities. But when guys hear about us, which is usually through the podcast, when guys hear about us and they want to start one, we're absolutely happy to help them and equip them to start. We've got a phenomenal tribe launch team waiting. So, I mean, if any listeners here, you know, want to start up a tribe, check us out at men'salliancetribe.com, men'salliancetribe.com. And you can, you know, see if there's any tribes in your area. And if you want to start one, you can do that as well. Pretty easy.
Perfect, man.
Yeah.
Well, it's great having you, man. And I thank you for having me on your podcast. You let
Absolutely,
me
man.
ramble for a while, and I got your stuff, reposted it on my stuff.
Thank you.
Do you have a Twitter? I keep saying Twitter's X.
I have Men's Alliance T, right? On
Yeah,
X.
yeah. I need to follow. I just started mine again.
I am personally not on X, Twitter. I don't follow it, but yeah, we have an account there, and I think it just echoes all of our other stuff, you know, our Instagram and,
Same as
Facebook stuff. Yeah.
Same as me.
That's
Same-
cool. I
same
you know,
as
I was wondering with them starting in Australia, you're going to use it as like an excuse to take a trip to Australia because that would be pretty cool. I feel like.
Oh man, I hope so.
You should do it, man. I've never been there.
You know where we're headed next. So we started here in Virginia, and then we really spread to North Carolina and Pennsylvania is where we have a big presence. But right now we're really blowing up in and around Dallas. And so I'm really fired up about Texas, and I'm coming out there in October to visit our Dallas tribes, and we're going to be at a big Ignite conference there in Dallas in October. So I'm excited about that and hope to really, go big in Texas.
Yeah.
You will.
And a lot of what you said has resonated with me today, man, when you spoke about taking these new tools for your tool belts, when we were talking about therapy or meeting with other guys.
Right.
I think that is what it's all about. Not everything you say is going to resonate with everybody, but they're probably going to take something from that and say, hey, I could use that for myself. And I think that's just so important, whether it's therapy, whether it's meeting with other guys and working out, whether it's just listening to a podcast where you hear something or reading something. I think all of that could be used for self-improvement and yourself as a man. And there's such a need for this. I can't emphasize that enough.
Absolutely. Well, hey man, thank you guys so much. I want to, just tell you, I appreciate what you guys are doing. And, you're a big part about what's right in our culture right now with, with
Thanks, man.
masculinity, with leadership, with speaking up, with learning boldness. You guys are crushing it. And thanks for just, having me on as a very small part.
Oh, shut up, Air Force, man. I still respect you. I still respect you. We'll appreciate it again. Brian, you keep doing what you're doing. And our paths will cross again. And honestly, I'd like at some point we could do something together where maybe guys come out here and shoot. They come out where I'm at, and we do a day. We do 2 days of shooting and hanging out.
I will cancel whatever's on my calendar when you give me that green light.
I think we could do an excellent event out here. I think it'd be fun as hell, bro. Be awesome.
I got to do one thing before we disconnect here. I got to introduce you guys to my right-hand man sitting over here beside me. Hasn't been on camera yet. This is my son, Braden Mills.
Hey,
Oh,
what's
man. I
up,
thought you were
bud?
going to show us
How's
the
it
dog.
going, guys? Yeah, I've been over here pretty
What's
quiet.
up? And I didn't drop an F-bomb, buddy. I think
Yeah,
this
I
is gonna
cursed
be our
more than
best.
you.
This is gonna be our best YouTube ever that has never got blocked because I don't think I swore one time.
Yeah.
Because hey, well, you got a good dad there, but you keep him on his toes, man. Keep him on
Yeah.
his toes.
By the way, is what he's saying like resonating with you? You should, because we're speaking about things in the youth, but all of us are kind of old men at this point. Like, does it resonate with you what he's doing?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We had a podcast with the teens of Men's Alliance and our perspective on it, and it's still really impactful. And I mean, I heard you earlier talking about teens with their energy drinks and stuff, but I got black coffee right now, and
There's you
there
you
we
are
go.
one, and you are one and of like hundreds, and it's not just the teens. We're talking all the way to like 30s, 35. Nobody drinks coffee. Whenever I go talk to my law enforcement buddies, my cop buddies, all the people, new recruits coming on, they're always like, dude, nobody drinks coffee anymore. It's like, how can you trust somebody that doesn't drink coffee? So
I know. Well,
good on you, brother. Good on
this
you.
is like a aspect of Men's Alliance that we never even touched on, is the father-son aspect of it and the teenagers that do it. So Braden here, he's almost 17. He's been doing Men's Alliance with me for like 5 years
That's
at
awesome.
least. And it's been such a fun thing for he and I to do together. Old guy, and he can crush me on burpees per minute. I'm on number 2 and he's on 10, but it's that devotion around the fire where sometimes like a teenager shares like some struggle they're going through, and then some 30-year-old speaks up and is like, well, here's how that worked for me, and then like a 60-year-old is like, well, let me tell you how that's good, right? So we get a lot of that intergenerational wisdom around the fire.
Well, that's how you
That's
get
cool,
it.
man.
Experience, man. Experience trumps book smarts, man. Street smarts always trumps book smarts, in my opinion. It's good to have both, but man, that experience you learn from the old guys, man.
Yeah.
I'm one of those old guys. I'm getting
Absolutely.
there. Yeah. Well, God bless you, bro. Thanks for coming
thank you
on,
so much,
man.
man. And as I said, thanks for doing it on very short notice. I
Appreciate
don't know
it.
how much this is personal, but from what I heard from a member of Men's Alliance who helped me book this with you, like someone near and dear to you is in the hospital. It sounds like, so it sounds like you're going through a lot and
Yeah,
staying
that's right.
strong through it all, man.
Yeah, that's right. And having that tribe is a big part of it. I've had guys texting me all day, hey, how's your mom doing? Praying for you guys. And you never feel like you're walking alone. So it's been
good.
awesome. Thank you guys.
Well, prayers to you. I didn't
Yeah,
know
absolutely.
that, but you got my prayers too, brother. And
Thank
be
you.
safe. And hey, and tell your boy thank you for thanks for sharing him just for a second too.
That's right. Well, hey, just let us know anytime, and we'll come
Okay.
shoot with you.
All right, brother.
You can teach an Air Force guy how to shoot.
Yeah. We'll just shoot together. Let's just put it that way. We'll do
You
all
got
right.
it.
That's all for this episode of Battle Line Podcast. But we're always posting new content on social media. Follow us on Instagram at Battle Line Podcast and on Twitter at Battle Line Pod. That's an order. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes up every Tuesday. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Believe in yourself. Face all challenges head on. And as always, never quit.